Happy Butter Miracle Day. I am Eric Vogelsang from the Sullivan Street podcast. I'm here with Chris Miggs. Chris, happy Butter Miracle Day to you.
We got a record. We got a record to listen to.
And
I
we're
woke
going to
up this morning. I sat in a chair on a beach and I listened to a new Counting Crows record. What more could one ask for in like a day?
a super rare that's why we think this might be our first, and I don't want to say only, but our whatever you call it, quick hits, hot takes, quick release, because this is the first album release since we've started the podcast, and
Mm-hmm.
also this is not something that happens very often at all. So let's yeah, one advantage about being on now, I ordered the CD. I think it just arrived, actually. I got from my Ring notification. And I wish I had the liner notes, because I am kind of curious if there's anything in the CD booklet.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one advantage to the YouTube release now, and I'm being on, is it's always released midnight East Coast time for the US.
Mm.
So I can start listening at 9 p.m. and I could listen for 2 hours and I don't totally destroy my bedtime. When a lot of people on Reddit are like, it's midnight, I'm going to keep it playing while I try to fall asleep. It's 1 a.m. kind of thing in New York. So yeah, so so we're gonna quickly talk about. It's definitely. I don't want to say a review. I want to say, I guess, our hot takes.
Yeah,
Um,
this is, I mean, there's no way with any record that you can really break it down on day one. This is more of a fun thing of just sort of, I almost want to just sort of capture these initial reactions to see
yeah,
some of this is certainly going to change over the next, the months and the years. There are songs I heard for the first time that didn't do for me that are like my favorite songs, and other ones that pop the first time that are just in retrospect, you're kind of like, oh, that kind of works, but it's not, my favorite song.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
listen, we were talking about changing our hard candy ratings just a month ago, right? And that album's been released for 20 years. So besides talking about Butter Miracle, the complete suites, we are gonna save some time at the end, just because there really is a lot of Crows thingsy going on. This might be the most.
mhm.
I mean, I would almost argue this might be the most Crowsy year that will likely happen for a while, because as we were saying in the pre-show, not only do we have the new album, but the hidden the HBO documentary that's been long rumored to have happened, and then was produced and bankrolled by Bill Simmons. I think
Right. Well, his group. I mean, I think he
his
has like a,
group.
he has
Um,
like a production arm at HBO or Max or whatever
okay.
it's called now. But yeah, that premieres at the Tribeca Film Festival in less than a month from now. I'll be there on opening night. Get your tickets now if you're listening to this and you're anywhere near New York City. There's three different showings too, so you don't have to necessarily be there opening night.
Okay.
You could be there the second or third night as well. Just those are equally valid. They're all just showing a movie. So unlike a Crow show, all of them will presumably be essentially the same unless they've been taking cuts in between. Um,
And we
but yeah,
don't.
there's just a lot going on. Adam's everywhere. Adam's telling
Yeah.
fun stories on Jimmy Fallon, and
Yeah,
you
he's
know,
Jimmy Fallon, and they're interviewed. I just mentioned, I put on Reddit yesterday, which got a lot. I mean, it's funny, people post on Reddit, oh, here's the new interview of the day, and I posted the link to the GQ one, and boy, that got tons of likes, because people really like that long form, and I did take some notes about that. By the way, we don't know a lot about the documentary, right? The release date. I was going to say the HBO release date. We talked to somebody at HBO. It has not been announced yet, but they said fall.
yes, fall. I think for everyone is the likeliest
Yeah.
answer. Um,
And I guess I'll say, because he gave us authorization, but James Campion said, "Hey, that book is still in the works." Because when he came to our podcast, he said unofficially hiatus. He was optimistic it would, but since then he told us and said we can share that he does plan to finish that book. The last. The wrapping up part, I guess, is going to have less Adam's input, mostly because of Adam's schedule. But I just trying to get everybody excited about all the things going on in
yeah, there's just
Crowsland.
a lot happening, and it's positive. It's always there's always stuff to talk about, but this time, right now, there's just a lot going around.
Right.
So
And
let's. I mean,
yeah,
I don't
let's
want
go
to.
right
I don't
into
want to.
the album. Yeah.
Yeah, let's not bury the lead. What do you think of the record, Eric? Do you like it?
Well, it's definitely, as someone put on Reddit. Now they put a more negative spin, but someone said this is pretty unique in that. I mean, I know that CDs or albums are leaked online and all that stuff, but this is unique in that half the album was released 4 years ago,
Hmm.
and two of the remaining five songs were released as singles, leaving only three new songs out of nine. I like it a lot. I think it is. It's in some ways it's a continuation of what they've been doing in the
Hmm.
Brian Deck era. Well, particularly somewhere under Wonderland, and I would also argue Underwater Sunshine. Kind of that theme that I think there's been a theme of the band that started post Saturday Night Sunday mornings. So I think that has
Yeah.
continued. I also think it's a bit of a tribute, like tribute almost to some bands in their past, while also putting their spin on it.
Yeah, I do think I think it's of a piece with the last ones, but I do think it's interesting that it felt like some of the writing felt a little bit different than the first Butter Miracle
Yeah.
and Underwater Sunshine.
Yes.
Um, I think in particular, I think with Love from A to Z is kind of a different sort of song. I think Underneath the Aurora is a little bit different song. Under
Yeah.
the Aurora, sorry. Um, and I it's and well, and Box, like, the writing is a little bit different, and I like it. I think in some ways I really kind of connect to some of this. I felt again in first listen a
Yeah.
little bit better than I connect to some of the more recent records from a lyrical perspective. I actually from loved it with Love from A to Z. If we want to go hot take here,
Yeah. Let's do it.
here's my hot take with that on first listen. I was like, this might be their best song in 15 years. Like I
Okay.
might like it better than anything
Wonderland.
on Somewhere Under Wonderland
Yeah.
and anything on the first. So, and again, that's just a little bit of hot take. That's a very hyperbole. I might eat those
Yeah.
words, but
Yeah.
I really just kind of I like listen. I was like, that is that's kind of what I really like from this band. There was something about the nature of the lyrics there that really kind of connected to me. I think we've talked a little about this before, but I think Adam's lyrics going back to Somewhere Under Wonderland have gone in a direction that it's a little more whimsical, right? Like Spaceman in Tulsa, I actually think is a good example of that and feels
Yeah.
like lyrically kind of like a continuation of the last couple of records.
And
Um,
clearly, and they've even said this in the GQ article, more third person, more
mhm.
storytelling in the whimsical, like you said, a little more abstract, but based upon reality, right? More maybe back to his, I don't know, back to his English major days or something. But you're
Yeah,
right. I see what you're saying. And I don't know if it's because it was either partially or mostly a love letter to his girlfriend, and maybe that's part of it.
I think it might be part of it. Exactly that it is does feel whether it is exactly that or not. I'm not here to again speculate the A to Z thing. I mean, her
Yeah,
name is Zoe. She said that right, A to Z.
yeah.
Someone else pointed out that Adam, the beginning of Adam Duritz, right, starts with an A and ends with a Z, so it
Oh,
could
that's
be
true.
with love for
Oh, but yeah, but
me,
I think I
essentially.
read somewhere that it clearly was a Zoe. Yeah, yeah, reference as well. I joke though
But
with some
yeah,
of this stuff because he seems so like I don't know how to say it. Seems so happy singing it, but there's some lines where he kind of rips on himself a little bit, and I was like, hey, this is as great of a love song as you're gonna get, and it's very earnest, and this is what you're gonna get from Adam, which I love.
yeah.
It's
Which I
fantastic.
think again we talk about like a lot of again what we think are some of their best songs, and there is that always that self-deprecating kind of
Yep.
aspect to it, of like it's unlucky for you to love me. I mean, we just finished, talking about Hard
Yep.
Candy, right? And how much we all loved like Up All Night and Why Should You Come When I Call, which are songs that are basically like, what I love you, but why would you love me? you know?
Yeah, did you
And
did you
yeah,
did you get the impression? I think you're exactly right, but the difference is, and maybe because he's still in this relationship and seems to be very happy, given what the GQ article was saying, is that I think while he's doing it this time, I sense a smile when he's doing it too.
yeah. No, yeah, it's a little, it's that self-deprecating aspect is a little bit less of an edge to it, sort of.
Yes, exactly.
Um, but yeah, musically, I like that song. I really like the sort of kind of bluesy Americana of it.
Yep,
What might be a good one way to put it.
that's right.
And I really just that one just hit me. Just sitting out by the pool this morning, I was like, "Damn, that's a great song." And part of it, like, it's interesting. I feel like as when I enjoy a band as we get later in their career, I always have a certain I feel like I certain lower my standards a little bit because we've all had bands that we loved that as they advanced maybe those albums were less meaningful. I have a distinct recollection of seeing the Goo Goo Dolls with Counting Crows in 2006, and they played some songs from their new record, and I was like, man, I mean, I like some of those Goo Goo Dolls, some songs from the 90s, and I was like, this is a bummer. They played one song where I was writing lyrics. The first time I heard it, I was like, oh, the next lyric is going to be this, because it
Oh,
was such a paint
obvious.
by
Yeah.
number
Yeah.
song that I was like, that's not great. And I think at the very least, like it really hits above that level of like, this is new and interesting work that adds to their catalog, and I'm sort of excited to hear it. I was actually kind of bummed they didn't, they played a festival recently. They didn't play a single song from the new
Hmm.
record. Um, and I'm hoping that they play a chunk of them this summer. I would love to hear, a few. So I mean, again, I know that I'm not the sort of average fan, and I would love to hear them play a lot of the new
Yeah.
record mixed in with the old songs. But even if it's a couple, two, three songs a night or something like that, I would be really
Yeah.
interested to hear these songs bounce off of the other ones.
Given that he was willing and Emmy were willing to play the whole suite in that one tour, I've got to think they're going to play two or three. I think Spaceman and
Yeah,
Tulsa is going to be there, and I think they might rotate, two out of the other four. I think they're going to play all five on the tour. That's one.
yeah,
I was just thinking about that. That's one. That's one advantage to having the EP releases. Is I think there's a better chance of hearing them on the tour, right? If they had just released all nine songs at the
right.
way they do their shed tours now, they're not going to play the entire album, but they might play, the majority of the EP, or in that case, the suite. They used to play all of it. Hey, who do you
Yeah.
think the? I know Jeff Harkness yesterday joked it was you, but who do you think the reference to Chris is in the song? I think it's Chris Carava from Dashboard, but that's just based
Oh,
upon the clear.
that would make sense. That I think that's a logical one. Yeah,
Okay,
I'm with you on that. I like because it's very obvious, right? The Curtis,
yeah,
blow some trumpet, right? That's Curtis
right,
Watson, and again, that's part of the charm too. As we talked about, like how some of these last records have sort of abstracted, where you're kind of like these are maybe real people, but they're kind of like I don't know. There's again there it's sort of buried under abstraction a little bit, whereas this is Curtis is like we know Curtis Watson's played trumpet on their records, and again it doesn't have to be anything specific, right? It's just like Curtis, but blow me a line.
yeah.
um
I mean,
and Chris show me a sign.
yeah, that's just my
Clearly,
take.
Eric, it means that he's listening to our podcast, and I'm
Yes.
his favorite of the two of us.
Here's your sign. I thought this was also very Van Morrison-y in a lot of ways, just the
Mm-hmm.
way he sings, and that kind of took me back, to the Full Circle, which the Full Circle comes up a lot on this album, at least three or four times. I think he looks back at the totality of his career. The last thing I'm going to, well, not the maybe the last thing. I mean, I had some lines. I guess I'll stay away from the lyric, but some of them are so good about, I wrote this line to stay in your thoughts when I'm out of my mind and stuff. But
Mm.
one thing, I like to tie things to my buddy from the Pumpkins, and one thing that really kind of grabbed my attention was, I think, in a way, this is also, I mean, it's a love letter, but also like something like, again, Adam's older, I think, and he's older than his girlfriend, I think, and then women outlive men, almost,
Mm-hmm.
generally. And I think in some ways this is like, hey, if something happens to me, you'll always have this love letter. He kind of hints at that a little bit. And there's one song by, the Pumpkins guy, because also Adam, right, maybe never thought he would be in a long term relationship, and Billy never thought he had kids. He has one song called Birch Grove that basically he's like, I have kids now. You're gonna outlive me by the odds, and this is kind of a love letter to you when I'm not around. You could
Mm-hmm.
this song shows my personality, and I think Adam's kind of
Mm-hmm.
doing that a little bit as well. He'd have to confirm that, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's a great song. Okay,
Yeah.
then we got
Spaceman in Tulsa.
Spaceman in Tulsa. I
I think my favorite thing so far about Spaceman in Tulsa is the censored version on Jimmy Fallon. The I'm a mama rock and roll star.
Yeah. Well, then right, and then one time he's like, "Mama, I'm a rock and roll star," right? You're right,
Yeah.
because he's talking to his mom. I was funny. I was going to say that I am certainly not someone that's averse to cursing. For some reason, I kind of, well, I guess I like both. I kind of like the censored version. I don't know. Do you have a take on that on all the f
Yeah,
bombs?
I'm with you there. I don't mind it. I'm not have a personal thing against it. It just I don't know, something about the context of the song. It feels a smidge out of place, especially since it's in repeated and
Right.
sort of like the chorus. It
Yeah.
feels it sort of juts up against the whimsy. Maybe that's sort of intentional. But yeah, weirdly, I kind of like the censored version better. Maybe in part, I've got a 7-year-old, and I'm like, I want to play her this song,
Yeah.
but I don't
And it
want
is,
her running around dropping f bombs.
and in a way, it's the most kid-friendly song. Do you remember even Jim wrote on Facebook once something like, "My daughter approves of like my daughter loves Spaceman and Tulsa." Now I don't know if he played for her the edited version. I think his
Yeah.
daughter is about the same age, like 7 or something or 9. But yeah, I thought about that. The other, remember I had a theory about this too. That I recently, and I really don't listen to a lot of new music, maybe
Mm,
like some of our audience, but I did go and finally buy Gang of Youth CD because he loves talking about it. The most recent. I guess they only have
mm.
3 long plays.
Okay.
And I told the audience might have said before I lived in Australia a couple of years. I love Australia. I think Australian like pop and rock music is in a lot of ways superior to the US, but it doesn't get exported to us much for whatever reason. Every so often there might be somebody.
Every so often, Kylie
Yeah.
Minogue, Natalie Imbruglia, Midnight
Yeah,
Oil,
no, some because I lived there and I was like, these
In
songs would
Excess.
do yeah, exactly. These songs would do so well in the U.S. Um, but yeah, that album is great, but the reason I thought about it is that he curses quite a bit in his
Mm.
songs, and then I'm just thinking of Adam like maybe just thinking like, oh, I could do this or could do that, and he's like, screw it, I haven't or F it, and that
Yeah.
I don't curse much, and I want to say, hey, I'm a rock and roll star, so maybe that's why he did it. Do you? I actually think this is the true. I mean, I've mentioned a couple kind of spiritual successor through the years of Mr. Jones, but I think this
Mm.
is the true
Mm.
one because this
Yeah.
is like it's not just like I became a rock and roll star yesterday. It's like yeah, I've been a rock and roll star for a while, and I did it, and I think it's looking back at his career and maybe other people that want to be rock and roll stars as well.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
And
Anyway,
maybe his relationship, right? Adam's mentored a lot of people, and there's something
yep,
interesting to the idea of um, it's about being a rock and roll star and all about these other people who want to be rock and roll stars in the way. I'm sure that gives him a certain perspective, now as he's talking to people who are trying to be rock and roll stars, and he
yep.
is one, and now he's sort of that that elder statesman of a sort.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think it's a great song. I know some people criticize the how do I say like the poppy single songs, more singly, right? If you think of Hanging Around and American Girls or something like that. I think sometimes people put that in a certain basket. I love Spaceman and Tulsa. I think it'll be fun in concert. And there's some great lyrics. The one about I didn't write down word for word about the empty shell, like not knowing what I'm singing.
Hmm.
That line, which I think, even though he puts so much energy in his concerts, when you do the same song over and over, sometimes you're in this like kind of zombie mood where that you're right. I mean, you know what I'm getting at, right? That you're like
Yeah.
singing it in your emotion, but you're also kind of just going through the motions in a way. Like I don't even know what I'm doing, right? And I don't know. It just really hit me.
Yeah. Yeah, and he's always talked about that a lot. Which there was a time, it's like 2009 or 10, where he talked about how before that it was always very important. He's like, I have to pour my emotions through how I'm singing and do these things.
Yeah,
And he was talking about how at that time he's like, well, but maybe I can also just have fun singing, and that could be a different thing. That could be a different feeling, and maybe something I can embrace. But at the same time, if you're not trying to pour your emotions through it every day, you're just trying to have fun,
yep,
maybe then you don't connect. That some nights you just go out there and you're just kind of, well, I got this song, I don't know, it's fun, I guess, to sing, but what am I even saying?
right,
So
yeah,
yeah, and it's an interesting, like, it is always interesting to track an artist's ongoing relationship with their music and how they're feeling about all of that. And so I think it's a little bit of a touchstone in that for Adam over these last few years. Because this is kind of an era now, this sort of Butter Miracle era post, they took that hiatus after the 2018 tour.
yeah,
And then obviously because of COVID kind of didn't get to come back until late 2021. That gave like a 3-year break.
yep,
And when they came back, they'd released the suite, right? And so it was like, hey, we've got the suite, we're playing it. And so this is now a new touring era for them, or an era of the band. And so it's a new context for everything, and I think that's a different. He's all, and he talked about that post pandemic too, just of like the joy of like, hey, like I get to play these songs again for people. That's exciting.
Yeah. And he
Um,
did say, and by the way, to go on your point about that you want to hear some of the songs, he did say, not that he promised to play a certain amount, but he goes, that's his favorite part. What did he said? Something along the lines of he almost likes touring the most right after an album because he wants to play the new songs live. So he actually said that in some
yeah.
interview I saw. By the way, one kind of, I don't want to say this is not a deep dive take, but kind of our take of being such hardcore fans is that this is an interesting case, I think. And if you watch the video, of the way they've made the music recently. I don't want to say now forever, but with
Mm,
mostly him, Emmy, Millard, and Jim, and then I just Charlie comes in a second stage, and then the third stage has been Dan and Dave. And I say that because Dan and Dave's guitar parts are fantastic in this, but you have to, if you kind of watch them live on the Jimmy Fallon and kind of listen, know what they play,
mm,
and watch the video a little bit, it's fantastic, but it's also added on. You know what I mean? Like
mm,
they sprinkled their genius to something that was already established instead of helping them establish the baseline. So
yeah.
it's just an observation more than anything.
Yeah, I also noticed during the Jimmy Fallon performance, it's interesting that that song has a lot of different pieces. There's a lot of parts where like one or two band members are kind of like standing
Yes.
for a sec,
Yes.
like, and obviously the chorus they're all playing, but there's sort of the way that song comes in is in different pieces, and it's sort of more obvious when you're watching them on stage doing it
Yep.
like that.
All right, so let's go to Train to Boxcars, and I've just again a lot of these hot takes are seeing what people write in YouTube and Reddit, and of course our takes. I guess someone posted recently, which I wouldn't have known, that the name and bit of the song it might be a tribute shout out to REM, who had a song. What was it called? Carnival of Sorts (parentheses boxcars), and
Okay.
he was heavily. He talks about that REM might have been one of his. What was it? Not that it
Yeah.
was his biggest influence, but biggest influence once he knew he wanted to be a songwriter, kind of thing.
Yeah, well, and I think especially in terms of like, he was they were starting out right in the mid '80s in terms of like bands where he was trying to make it, and I think the idea when he's always talking about like I wanted to be an indie artist, I wanted to be as big as I could, but in the context of being kind of indie, and if that was your goal in 1986, 87, who would you look up to? REM is the answer, right? They're
Yep.
the interesting band that's still independent but big enough to be that's a career,
Yep.
right? REM even at that point was obviously going to have a career. So I think, yeah, they were an influence. As I said, I think there is a very kind of like, it's not like an 80s song like they're synthesized big synthesizer or something, but there's a certain 80s ness to the
Yes.
drive and the rhythm, especially in
Yes.
the transitions between chorus and verse there. I like it. I liked it a lot, sort of from that initial thing. It's also interesting. It feels a little social commentary about the
He
parents with
admitted
two kids on the screens, and
he admitted it is social commentary, and I was almost going to mention at the end. He mentions a lot of these songs have political tinges. And he didn't really say that he didn't do that before, but I think he really hasn't so much done that before, at least in a big
yeah.
way. So definitely he mentioned boxcars. He said migrants and other anyway, but he said, yeah, it's pretty, and it's something we could maybe talk about later. But you're right. Of
As we
course, the
dive
comment.
deeper into that,
Yep, and the
yeah.
commentary watching the TV. Someone made me
I just
laugh.
assumed he's been very into the Boxcar Children book. Maybe he
Yeah,
was just, maybe he has like a niece or something, was really working on,
yeah.
doing their reading, their
That,
chapter books.
and as I said, the REM had the thing boxcars. Someone wrote on Reddit, which really cracked me up, and I kind of agree. They said, "Oh, this reminded me of 1492, like without the anger, or 1492 without something." I mean, I don't really. It just that comment cracked me up, and someone also wrote this
I will say I
dislocation.
was thinking Cowboys. I was thinking
Okay,
Cowboys a little bit. And yes, it's less I mean, those songs, all of those songs, especially
yeah,
1492 and Cowboys, are about very sort of like aggressively disenfranchised feeling people. Like there's like a sinisterness. Like Boxcar doesn't feel sinister, but it does have a little bit of that flavor. It's one of
yeah,
the interesting things as bands. I mean, bands can do whatever they want. There is that balance between like a band sounding like itself and a band trying to reinvent themselves constantly, and everyone does different things. And there is that level of like you can kind of hear for these there's a type of sound of
Yeah.
there's a range of palette here, and those sort of fit into that palette, I
Yeah,
agree.
someone even wrote dislocation. Yeah, I agree. I actually like the angrier things a little more, but that's just me. But yeah, clearly, yeah, I almost think that's a difference sometime of somebody or an artist who right, maybe that time was having more mental health struggles or angrier, and then now not as much. So have you said that same baseline, that same palette, but from a different psychological vantage point later in
Yeah.
life.
I mean, Cowboys is deranged, right? It's
Yeah.
about someone literally kind of slipping. That I mean, that one is an earlier song that's kind of on the metaphorical end. I assume,
Yep.
you know, like Adam hasn't wandered around with a gun in his hand.
Right.
Um, you know, but like it's a sort of the idea of like how do you make impressions on the world and sort of feeling like you're not like slipping. And this is this is less um that
Have
was
you?
a different energy. That was a mid 2000s Adam
Yep.
energy.
Have you been hearing the interviews where he? I'm guessing you have, but about the the Dana Dana. Do you know about the thing where he's like, "Oh, that was coronavirus, coronavirus." Have you heard that?
No, I actually
Oh,
I missed that one
so
yet.
it's kind of annoying because now every time I hear that riff, of course, at least for now, but he said that's where it originally started. He would walk around his apartment like going coronavirus, coronavirus, and Zoe would get mad at him because he kept doing it for like 2 years, and then he eventually, and then he eventually got a song out of it. And I think he said this was the hardest because it's a guitar based song. He couldn't completely finish it himself. He needed Emmy there basically, and the percussion group. Yeah, I'm so interested if anybody else gets writing credits to this song, and I'll find out in a few hours when I see my
Mhm.
CD. But you're absolutely right. Doesn't have like the '80s. See, sometimes people when they think '80s, they think the synth, but I absolutely could hear this like in a rock album of the '80s
Right.
or in the soundtrack of an '80s movie. And as I said, there was even part of me that I was thinking Tom Petty, I even said I heard some Van Halen in the third. I know some people not, but especially they did something with his vocals a little bit, Adam, on this one. So it was a
Yeah.
little bit okay. Then we got let's go to Virginia, our friend.
Mhm.
Which so my hot take on this is it's kind of a Raining in Baltimore sequel because we have Rain and a Mid Atlantic State and a kind of a ballad. And but my real hot take is like this is. I'm not saying he wouldn't have wrote Raining in Baltimore, but don't forget this is like the same ballad, But back then, when August was made, their lead guitarist was Bryson, who's a rhythm guitarist, where now they
Right.
have a full band, and this song feels like a full band. Not that it's really rocky, but
Yeah. Yeah, this one is interesting. I've been trying to like I actually went back in the middle of this one because I like it sonically, and I felt like I'm still. This is one where I'm like I feel like I'm still kind of processing the lyrics in the way all the way into the song. Um, I don't know. That
I,
was the
I,
one that stuck out for me. Of sort of like I felt like I need to sort of like let the words kind of sit with me a little bit.
and I love
Um,
rain imagery in general, which is why I
mhm.
like the Saturday Night Sunday Mornings cover. There was one part, he's done some callbacks in this album, not as much. There's some references, to Bobby and this thing, but there was one part that I laughed because he said like, "I blew a kiss across," and I'm like, he's gonna say a wire, but he said like a garden, so that I was wrong about that. What influence felt on here a little bit. It's like if and I love this song, but if James Taylor actually played with like a full band,
Hmm.
I was getting his. I could. Someone wrote on Reddit, which maybe made me think of the James Taylor thing too. They didn't write that, but they said it sounds like a timeless song that just got released. Right? It's out.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. If I played this
Agreed.
to my daughter and said this was made 40 years ago, they would be okay. I could see that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, I also heard some Van Morrison on here too. I know it's been said a lot, but I think some of these songs more than others he's done in the last couple decades. Okay. So then we have Under the Aurora, which I'm just going to say I love. I'm very interested to see
Yeah.
it live, and it's clearly a Beatles influence. And right, they even make a couple British references, which I guess is also that too. But anyway, your
Yeah.
take?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And the Beatles thing is interesting because it's Beatles influenced in the way that some of the Recovering the Satellites songs are kind of Beatlesy in that they're not like, it's not pastiche, but there's a certain quality to it that kind of pulls through. And I like that song a lot too. Um, I like on the whole, right? Sort of other than Spaceman and Tulsa, I sort of like. I feel like the lyrical thing is um like this is a strong set of lyrics that I want to spend more time with, and I like
Yeah,
the sort of the overall, I don't know, kind of tone and vibe of the lyrics here, where it's not again again a little bit less of the third person, a little bit more I you,
yeah,
like directed, speaking, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like um they feel like fresh and thoughtful topics for him.
yeah.
I know sometimes one of the other things as artists age, sometimes you get that thing where you're like, I feel like you've written this song. I feel like you've written these words before. This is just, kind of, and this is not that. Like, it
Yeah.
doesn't
Oh
feel like
no,
he's
no.
treading on the same topics, which is interesting, which is
That's
great.
right. I have another take later if we have a thing about him and his age and his lyrics. But one thing
Mm,
that Adam I love him for is he will not rehash just the same thing. He always tries to challenge himself. Sometimes I think he gets in his own head and does it too. I mean, he basically said he only wrote this, not only wrote the suite, but his main motivation behind the suite was like the competition with himself. That could he, partly motivated by Palisades Park, and then the way the Tall Grass was going, that could he make all four songs together. But you're absolutely right. Yeah. By the way, do you agree with me that I know that I'm pretty sure that if you had to have all the Crows members vote for their top 10 artists, that I think the one they have the most in common is the Beatles. I'm pretty sure. I know, Adam's been influenced. I know Dan Vickery, that's his favorite band. But I think Emmy and I think Millard has mentioned. Anyway, I could be wrong, but I'd like to. Part of me thinks that that's the band that they have the most in common.
yeah.
Um, I know Adam was influenced by Bruce Springsteen, but did you see? Maybe you didn't read the whole GQ article, but there was something about. Did you? Let's just throw this in, like of how one of the reasons Adam and Emmy became great friends, and then I think basically Emmy watched him play at Model Society, which we've talked
Mm,
about here, because he heard that he was great, and he said he didn't love the music was not his type of music, but he thought Adam was great, and then later had just a deep talk about music with Adam, like at a party that night or something. I
mm.
might be phrasing it wrong, and one of the discussions they got into, about different artists, and Adam was saying how great Bruce was, and Emmy said, "Oh, I understand, but I don't think he's one of the best ones." And like something like a week later, or a couple days later, Adam brought him all this Bruce music, and then like they bonded over that, and they've been great friends ever since. I just thought that was great. But it
That's
got, yeah,
yeah. That seems like their relationship long. Oh, like they basically drop piles of records on each other just all the time. They just come over with stacks. Like you can just almost see like
yeah,
at Emmy just kind of coming over with a tote bag full of
yeah.
CDs. He's just like, let's
And
pop them in.
it seems like Adam actually went out and bought these particular ones, which really impressed me. Like he actually spent money on it. Okay, so Under the Aurora,
Yeah,
no, but anyway, Under the Aurora, I think again will be great live in a just feels like a anthem, stadium, not a stadium, but you know what I mean, an anthem that you could play with a
yeah,
large audience.
yeah.
I
How
hope
did
they
you feel?
appreciate
Did
it.
you listen to the whole suite after you listened to the first five?
Not no, not in the no. I'm going to do that with the CD, and I know that I was going to mention this. I know that it got remixed.
I listened to it this morning. I did not notice any dramatic differences in the mixes, although I do not have a great ear for that. I
Okay,
will admit.
because
I'm
somewhere I read
certainly
that.
you
Yeah.
the songs are not unrecognizable. The
Yeah.
songs sound like the songs.
Okay.
And maybe they did some fresh mixing. It is interesting to me in that I think maybe in part because it's a suite, they literally played it, end to end a bunch of times. We all saw them play it, although all of us, not all of us, but
Yeah.
those of us who are fans saw them play it a fair number of times. It was kind of weird. I think it's going to be hard for me to not always just think of these as two EPs,
Yeah.
because there's just kind of the suite is the suite and it sounds great, but it's not unconnected from the other stuff. But I don't know. We had that for so long, and it's this
I agree
one
with
chunk.
you.
the EP. I think we were talking about this recently. Like Bon Iver did the same thing with the EP full album thing recently, but that EP was from like October, you know,
Yep.
and they put them together and it's two pieces. And actually, that's an interesting record. I've listened to that one a lot. That's probably my favorite record of the year so far. It's called Sable Fable. Sable is the EP. Fable is sort of the second half. But that's different because that one's sort of literally the it's sort of like kind of like darkness and then like processing darkness. Basically, is
Okay.
the sort of the second half. Um, and so there's a real kind of interesting progression there of the sort of the EP in the second half. Whereas here, these kind of feel they don't. So far, at least, I don't feel the sort of the separation of the one. And again, they put the suite in the back half, right?
Yeah,
So
that kind of surprised me a little bit, to be
yeah,
honest. Because I kind of think Tall Grass. I mean, I understand A to Z. I actually would have put A to Z as the closer and have the suite lead it. That's just me, but
but at the same time, if you do that, I think there's probably a strategy to that too. If you do that, someone picks up that record and they go, "Oh, I guess it's just the other thing with bonus tracks," and you're not
oh
focused on the
yeah,
new. I
yeah,
think, I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
but that's I think part of just the time gap there is. And there's a lot of, again, part of it I know is there's, I'm sure whoever they're working with on the release, there's strategy to this too in terms of how people process this stuff, and you know
Yeah, no, you make an interesting point, and I think some of the reviews I've read on the album were not aware. I mean, not they were aware, but they didn't really listen to the suite before, so they would get a
right.
much different take. I agree. The hardcore Crows fans that bought the EP, which was not a physical media, so you had to download it.
Yes, it
Um,
was. There's a vinyl of that.
Oh, vinyl. Sorry. Yes, you're right.
Yeah.
With the August track on it too, right? And but I think they're gonna have. I think we're always gonna separate those things in our mind. That almost feels like
Yeah.
a bonus add-on instead of a different album.
I will repeat
Yes.
my hot take here, which is that they should start playing the sweet songs separately in the concerts. I was struck again this morning listening to the Tall Grass. The Tall
Yeah.
Grass is awesome and would be a great show opener in the classic sort of Crows like buildup of like dramatic openers. And they should play it. And I don't need them to segue, right into Elevator Boots. They could segue into Mrs. Potter's Lullaby or something, and it would be great.
Oh,
I'm that's anyway.
yeah. I've
If you
been
guys are listening,
thinking.
that's my hot take there.
No, I've been thinking of you. I kind of think they're going to do that, but I'll be very curious if they actually do or not.
Yeah.
But I kind of think they might play like Elevator Boots, for instance. I do. I think
Elevator Boots
Tall.
also great would be a great song in the middle of a show, kind of separately.
Yeah. Do you think Tall? I
Bobby and
think
the Rat Kings is a great closer.
it's a great
You know,
closer. It's a great. Exactly. I think Tall Grass would be a good opener, maybe. To be honest, I don't know how you
yeah.
feel. Yeah.
I think it's an opener. I think like in the way they've opened with like La Ballet
Catapult.
d'Or, Catapult, When
Yeah.
I Dream of Michelangelo, they've even opened like
Yeah.
that in that sense of like we'll have like a dramatic thing to open and then like a quiet thing into the loud thing.
Yeah,
I always
Sullivan
like that.
Street's like that too. I hate to say, right? It
Mm-hmm.
starts with just that little thing, and then it crescendos into like down on your knee, whatever. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, we haven't talked about, and I know this is not supposed to be a review and ranking or anything. I love tall. Some people do not like tall grass. I love tall grass, and partly because it's so original. I love these other songs we're talking about, but you can hear influences, right, of either REM or I was saying James Taylor or the Beatles or whatever, or whether they're tributes or influences, and Bruce Springsteen, of course, with Bobby and the Rat Kings. Um, but like Tallgrass, I don't hear influence. I hear a Counting Crows complete original. No one can do that but
Mm-hmm.
Adam Duritz. And then some of his
Mm.
lines about the shaking rabbit, and of course the line about broken when you're children and you never get it back once it's gone. I mean, that just melts me almost every time to this day. It's so Adam. I love it. It was all hard to me for. I almost cried just saying it right now. Okay. And then here's one thing. So we'll just quickly mention about Angel on the 14th Street. I don't want to say a ton about it, but I do want to say what I brought to Chris and Jeff recently. That the title. Now, again, Adams talked about how a lot of this is about society's treatment of women. He's talked about
Mm-hmm.
that on a couple podcasts recently, and that there's some political messages there. But the title of it, Angel of 14th Street, is clearly a tribute to Gang of Youth song Angel of 8th Ave, which is
Oh.
on their most recent album. Now, I don't know why, or if they just did it as a friendly thing to each other. They were, and I guess technically, Adams was first because I think this was released 21, and I think Gang of Youth's 22.
But he'd heard it
Um,
probably before that if
and they
Gang of
were
Youth was
about
working
the
on it.
same time, and they love each other. As I said, Adam and now I forget their lead singer's name, but they talk about more of, I don't know if it was an older
Yeah,
brother or mentor or father relationship kind of thing. So,
yeah. Also, I
um,
love 14th Street. One of my favorite spot if you're going somewhere in New York, I would direct you to 14th Street and start from
and
there and just
doesn't
kind of get that
14th?
vibe.
No, I love 14th Street, and doesn't 14th Street also border Washington Square? Isn't that the top border?
Kinda. It's a little bit no, it's a little bit north of it. The top border of Washington Square is like I think
Is it
8th.
eighth?
The
Eighth?
bottom is
Okay.
West 4th Street, but the top is like 8th or something like
Oh,
that.
Union
But
is
you
Union
can walk
is it
Union
Union
Square.
Square that
Yeah,
borders 14th
14th Street
Street?
is Union
Okay.
Square.
Yeah. Okay.
And you could if you go though, if you walked like 14th and like 5th Avenue or something, you can walk kind of straight down into Washington Square. So it'd be a natural place where you would just sort of pop up and out. And great donut place on 14th and 7th, the Donut Pub. If you're in the city, go hit the Donut Pub. They're open very, very late. So after a show, go grab some donuts. It's also where Irving Plaza
Yep.
is 14th, kind of tucked over on Irving. I don't know. Anyway.
Oh, I love that area. No, I absolutely agree. And also, of course, near Washington Square, not too far, is Sullivan Street.
Mm-hmm.
Not too
Mm-hmm.
far, so you could get down to there as well. Yeah, I think some of those places are where they shot some of the. And I know Adam doesn't live too far away, right? Because he lives in. Why am I forgetting the neighborhood he lives in? I think near the Flatiron Building, or he doesn't live in Soho. I'll think of it in a second.
I thought it
But
was Washington. I thought it was Washington
I
around
think he lives closer to
somewhere.
Union Square, but not too
Okay.
far away.
Yeah.
I'm just forgetting the neighborhood. The maybe Gramercy, is it? Yeah, I can't remember now.
It could be
So
but yeah.
yeah, but okay. So yes, we love Angel of 14th Street,
Rumor,
Angel of
innuendo. We don't know. I don't know where the guy lives. We
yeah.
just,
So
someone mentioned something somewhere.
but yeah, but he does sometimes mention the neighborhood, so it's not
Yeah.
me. Yeah. So then we got all right, and then we got well, elevator boots. I'm not gonna say much, but obviously
No, and
this
we'll
is
review that. I feel
yeah,
like it's hard to. It's like I think our takes are on these new songs. The other
yeah,
ones,
yeah,
we'll get to when we finally eventually do that whole record. I guess
yeah,
that'll be an interesting question for us when we get there. Do we review this whole record,
yeah. Which I
or do
think
we
we
review the two
should.
pieces?
Yeah.
Probably. Oh, that's a. But how do you break up this week? We'll debate. We've got a while before we have to debate that, Eric.
Can I
We'll
mention
get there.
though, for Bobby and the Rat Kings, besides what you said, it's a fantastic. I think if the crowd knew these songs, it would be a great closer. And it is a great closer when they do it. But that clearly, and I had other people had to advise me of this, but the name Bobby and the Rat Kings, which if you watch the video seems to be just some fictional band that they kind of cover, right?
Mhm.
And they talk from their standpoint, but the name of it is clearly a tribute to, what is it, the Boomtown Rats,
Oh,
because you have the Rat Kings, and the lead singer of that band was Bob. Was Bob, so that's the Bobby and the Rat Kings.
no, there you go.
Yeah, and I think even one of the songs kind of sounded like it. So
Yeah.
anyway, but did I mention when we did A to Z that was because you were talking about how different that song, that I think Adam said he wrote the other four first, and then
Oh
A
no,
to
that's
Z.
interesting.
A to Z was clearly, because I think that's where it was. Oh, it might only be 8 songs, the two suites, and then he added the A to
The
Z
ninth one. All
near
right.
the end. Okay. I just wanted to know if I had any other just last things about the album. I've said this before. I think for whatever reason, since Hard Candy, I think whoever does the mix make sure that Charlie's parts are very loud and
Mm-hmm.
and easy to spot, and I think it shines how great he is.
Mm.
So the last 3 or 4 albums, Underwater Sunshine, Somewhere in the Wonderland, and All the Butter Miracle, you can hear Charlie's genius at work. Where I think in some of the other albums it was a little more hidden, and you have to really pay attention.
Yeah.
Um,
Charlie's aging like fine wine.
yeah, I want someone to tell me of a better piano player in a mainstream band than him. I could be wrong. Yeah, this is one thing I was thinking. We've talked about this before. I'm not here to comment good, bad, or indifferent, but kind of hinted this is a new era, or sorry, a recent era of the Crows. Very rocky, more Emmy influenced. Emmys is more there during the songwriting process, and more of a key of the band. And that Brian, they've now used the same producer for 2.5 albums. I mean, one interesting thing which I kind of forgot is when Brian Deck first worked with them, he did the Sunday morning side, which was the
Hmm.
more relaxed side, and then since then he's been on all the rockers.
Yeah,
Um,
well, because his background, right, was he like fruit bats and stuff like
okay,
very kind of indie folk kind of things. So I think that's what inspired them to use him for Sunday mornings. But then, yeah,
yeah, and we talked about
now
the
it's
third, the writing more in the third person, and I said a little more politics, which might be new, and I think the credit
but
is
still
it's
not. I mean,
subtle, it's
it's
subtle,
subtle. It's
yeah,
very it's just more getting. I think it's a little bit more. This is how I'm feeling about stuff, and I want to
yeah,
get some of that energy out in the world. It's not
exactly.
like a political song in the sense of which I think is well. Everyone should do what they need to do and feel they need to express themselves however they want. I would never tell anyone like don't write a political song, but I do enjoy when it's a little bit more like getting those ideas, dropping those ideas into songs and letting them sort of resonate.
Well, yeah, I think it's more just what he's been thinking about, as the world has become more political and he's older, right? And yeah, in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, just some of these social issues, I guess I just want to say, and some of it are more generally, like he talked about, there might be of harassment of a certain group, social group, but at the, the but the feeling of being isolated might apply to that group, but it could apply to individuals in a variety of other settings where feeling that
Hmm.
you're that you don't connect with other people. My only I just have two thoughts. These are I don't think any of these are negative. Just thoughts I'm thinking about reflecting on the Crow's career. And we said
Hmm.
the albums are now sparsed out or spaced out, much
Hmm.
wider. Chris and I were talking in the pre-show, like when will the next one? Because if you don't count Underwater Sunshine, they went from releasing every 3 years to like every 6 years,
6.
and
Yeah.
now this was 11 since
If
Wonderland. If you're
but if
counting
you
LP to
don't
LP,
count, yeah, but I think I couldn't disagree with it because I feel like it was. I think of it as it's 11, but it's really 7 and 4.
okay.
Right? It's really those two. I think, and I think that's part of why I don't want. Well, finish your point. I feel like I'm responding because I know what you're going
Oh,
to say.
yeah, I guess you're right. No, that was just right. So that might be a different take, right? So maybe you can. I guess part of me is like, oh, if you're expecting a full length album, it could be longer and longer. But one thing I was thinking of, and I
Yeah.
understand Adam's challenge. At one point he said, "Hey, I don't need to always write about me all the time. I'm not 29 anymore.
Hmm. Yeah.
I want to keep some." He definitely has said in the past, "I want to keep some stuff private." I think he wanted to challenge himself by being more of a storyteller. Um, there's a little bit of me, and I think some of this does come across. And again, this album's been out for less than 24 hours, so I might catch things. So A to Z, I think, has some of this, and also, well, anyway, looking back at his career as a rock star, Mama, I'm a rock and roll star. There's a little bit of me that was like, oh, I almost want to hear him get a little bit angsty as a 60-year-old and the
Mm.
topics of mortality and you know what I mean, or maybe how people have drifted apart and how some have been loyal. I almost want to hear some of that before, in the next album or as Crows move on to their career, because it's different topics,
It might be there. I don't know. I
no,
think
that's why I said it might be there. Maybe it's a little more cleverly
yeah,
in
maybe
there.
yeah, I think we've got to we need our time to pick apart these lyrics and
Yeah,
sort of let them sit with us. But even again, as we were talking about with Boxcar, right? There is some of that angsty feeling,
yeah,
and I think with From Love From A to Z, there's a certain sense of um, a reflectiveness maybe on these some the certain things that don't change about who he is and how he feels about these
yeah,
things.
yeah. And I think even
Um,
Virginia, I heard some of that too, to be honest.
yeah, yeah.
In the
Um,
raid, so that was just a little bit of me. You know what I mean? Because I think, anyway, it was just that's more of a reaction of how some answers that he has given in interviews, and then my thing would be like, okay, but you're not dating around anymore or whatever, and it's going to be a little different. Okay, is it
well, I mean,
yeah,
that's the thing. If he was still writing songs about this girl made me sad
yeah,
at his age, I would be very disappointed. There are some artists who I feel like I'm like, look, I love your music, but like, at a certain point,
yeah.
if it's not, it can't always be them. It's been 25 years of them. It might be you. you know. And so I think I've been very pleased. One of the things I've liked about the sort of evolution of the band over these last 15, 20 years is that I do think Adam's writing has sort of appropriately matured
Yeah.
over time,
Yep.
in a way that I think is it's great. I think I I wouldn't want him to write Goodnight Elizabeth again. Like,
Yeah.
that's
That's
not
that's
no.
right. Do you my last thing, just is more of the career retrospective thing that I thought about listening to this album,
Hmm.
is it got to what, and I know we did get one ballad on here. I wouldn't call Tall Grass a ballad. So I think the
No,
Virginia
it's
song's a ballad. But it made me think that, remember what Jeff said recently about maybe one reason the one was well liked, besides being a popular Taylor Swift song, is that it was him
mm,
at the piano. He didn't really do that, and it's funny because I do want him to grow, and I've always defended. I love that every album has a new feeling and stuff. There's always a part of me though that maybe for like, have one song maybe be the ballad, or classic piano ballad. And there's a little bit of me that
yeah.
thought I love Emmy's influence, and I love the sound that he is bringing as they've changed direction. But then there's a part of me that thinks, what would happen is if he did the same thing and for one song, fly Bryson in and say, "Hey, it used to be just us two. Let's do one song together," and how that would come up.
Yeah.
That just a little bit of me,
Well,
like, yeah,
here's what I'll say, that also
yeah,
is that it doesn't necessarily have to be a dual choice like that. Like,
right,
there's nothing that stops him from doing a session in which he's like, hey, here, or even, I guess, theoretically releasing the demos. I don't know how they sound or whatever,
yeah,
but I would love to hear. I mean, he wrote presumably a lot of these songs at the piano. I would love to hear what the piano version of Elevator Boots sounded like. And
yeah.
that doesn't have to replace the final version. Um,
Yeah.
one of the great things about Counting Crows is that there's all these versions of some of these songs where you're like, I can pick the Rain King that suits me on a day-to-day basis if I feel like it.
Yeah.
I would love to. That's one thing I'd love to hear them do a little bit more. They've done a little bit of They've done Spaceman and Tulsa acoustically together. They
Oh,
did
right.
Tall Grass and Elevator Boots like that on the other record. But I think it would be fun to hear things like that, and I'm hoping that maybe we get some of that as part of these ongoing promotional things, or that, just
Well,
let's hear what the Tall Grass sounded like just to Adam at the piano. I don't know.
yeah.
Maybe it's
What
maybe
interesting?
you'd be like, that's even better. I don't know. I
Yeah,
Or just different and
different.
interesting in a different way into the song. You know.
One interesting thing about the GQ article, it was mostly focused on him, and I'd have to reread it. It's very long, and I'm so rushed with stuff yesterday. But like, it almost seemed like the author was there for a couple, like almost stayed there, or was there a couple of days in consecutive. I'm not sure. And then at some
Mm,
point, his girlfriend and the publicist were there, but then sometimes they weren't. It mostly focused on Adam, but they did interview a little bit Emmy. So I'm not sure if he just showed up for a little bit. And then there were a couple
mm,
lines from Dan, which seemed a
mm,
little random. Maybe they called him on the phone. One thing that
right.
really struck me with that was that Dan. It sounds like Adam gave Dan, like, and think about it. Emmy wasn't as involved in the writing then, or maybe not involved at all. But with
Mm,
Recovering was almost as much Dan's album, the hard stuff. They said like that Adam told Dan, like, have your way, like, you make this rocky. You're our
mm,
lead guitarist. You're the rock and roll guy. So I thought that was kind of a neat little nugget for Crows
yeah.
fans. And because he said something like, "Oh, it hasn't really happened since." I'm not saying it was a negative way, but the way the songwriting hasn't been the same. What about that new nugget we heard yesterday? Because one theme we've talked about is, why don't they play Amy Hit the Atmosphere? And Adam has acknowledged it's because he would have to relearn the piano parts, and he is, as of right now, too lazy to do so. He didn't say he wouldn't do it, but he said that's why. He said actually the band has asked him to play it.
Ooh,
Yeah,
I hadn't seen that the interview yet, but yeah. Yeah, guys, come on. You guys have played, as we established and broke down with David Lowery, right? Like, they've played like every song from that record pretty regularly, other than Amy Hit the
yeah.
Atmosphere, which they haven't played in 20 years.
And more recently stayed away from All My Friends, which is probably my
Which,
favorite. So I want that one back.
let's
But
get that
those
one
are the
back too,
two.
guys. Come on.
Yeah. But yeah, that article fills some gaps in the history. There was just a couple things because we have things. Oh, Jeff talked about this. It's something to talk about more later, but I knew that Adam was upset about the sales of Wonderland and that he was upset about the impact. But he kind of
Mhm.
hinted in a couple interviews recently. He was kind of upset at a lot of the recognition post August. Both the critics and also even Recovering, he wasn't happy with the sales of Recovering, and that sold, was it 2 million or something like that? I think.
Yes, yeah, yeah.
But that was interesting because most, yeah, I understand feeling that way, about hard candy and stuff, etc. But anyway, that was it. Some other things
Yeah.
that we could talk about later. The author really, we just did the hard candy review, and the author really made a point about how, kind of almost what Jeff was saying, but that Big Yellow Taxi was like an accidental single, right? It was almost kind of like something thrown together. And remember, he wanted it to
Mhm.
be more of a hip hop thing, but then
Yeah.
I forgot that, was it Village Voice named it as the worst song of the 2000 decade, or Rolling Stone, or somebody did. I remember hearing
Yeah.
that before, and that he thought that really, for at least in the short term, hurt their kind of image in both the public. They go, "Oh, that's the kind of band they are now," and then the critics also didn't. Right, they
Yeah.
weren't looking into the deep dive of Good Night L.A.
Yeah.
and Up All Night. Instead, they were focused on that, which was not even supposed to
All
be a single.
right. Also, I mean, Ashley Simpson released records around that time. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
let's not get too up in arm. But that, although that was also part of it, it's a generational thing. That was also the era of the time. Like, I remember at the time reading a lot of this magazine Blender, which is great in some ways because it did like it asked artists a lot to like pick out different songs. I learned about a lot of music reading that magazine. They would do whole discography reviews of
yeah,
artists, right? It was great in a lot of ways, but it was also snarkier. It was also that tone of that early 2000s, that sort of hipstery tone of like, well, this is the crappy record. This is the one where they were doing, like,
yeah, yeah,
and I think I think that it just was sort of an unfortunate timing in that regard. The sort of the that song was a hit, but it was sort of people were snarky about it, and it was kind of,
yep,
I don't think it was a helpful thing to the image of that band. But it was interesting. I think again the real ones. I don't know. The real ones never went away. I was actually talking them. I'm here. The reason why I sound like I do and not like I normally do is because I'm at a music festival with some friends, a band Cordovas, who are playing a festival down in Mexico, and the lead singer Joe Firstman, who's we go back a long ways. I just happened to mention something actually about our podcast last night, and he was like, "Oh, I actually opened for those guys at like the Basilica Block Party in like 2004," and he was like, "Man, they were great. Like I was like, I thought I liked those, but all those songs are like they were so good." And it's like not like someone where we're sitting down chopping up about like Counting Crows records, but he was like, "Yeah, man, those are good." And
Oh, and
Joe's a songwriter and he cares, and it's
well,
like
that was one of the
there's a
authors.
real recognizes real aspect,
Yeah, that
to
was one
it.
of the author's points too. That nowadays a lot of people, I guess, admit that they were Crows fans or influenced by the Crows fans, and he got the impression there was like a short period of time, maybe around Hard Candy and shortly after, where people didn't mention it in much. And of course, people like me were always going to say they love the Crows, but that there might
Right.
have been that was like there was some backlash after August, but there might have been some backlash around that time too. And that, anyway, that was kind of the author's point. And then the author was telling people he was interviewing Adam, and all of a sudden everybody's like, "Oh, I love Adam. He's great. He influenced me. They're one of my favorite bands ever." He made a point about that. I mean, usually the authors don't get into that. Like, I tell my friends and other band people about who I'm interviewing, and they gave a
Yeah.
positive reaction. And I thought that was really telling, both about and I feel bad for Adam in that way. I really do. So
Yeah. No, I mean, again, I think Jeff's book does kind of a great job of sort of tracking some of this stuff of like the weird hand they were dealt post August at times of like how people responded to them, and it was more like the world changing around them than them changing for the most part. Obviously the band has
yeah,
evolved, but like a lot of it was just I don't know, so much weird energy because Jeff did the research and was reading like all these concert reviews and just how weird those reviews were. And I think Adams talked about it. He's like, "Oh yeah, for years like I couldn't read a concert review without someone bringing up who I've dated and not
yeah,
just talking about
yep,
like
or his
whether
hair
they
or
like the
whatever.
songs or not." Yeah.
Yeah,
It's all very buried in that, and, not, and they couldn't just be
Yeah.
like, I liked the show or I didn't like the show. You
Yeah, or
know,
he's
like
yeah, or he's mopey and wants us
it
to feel
worked for
bad
me,
for
it didn't work
him.
for me. You know,
Yeah.
um,
The
which is interesting. It's like it's a hard. I don't know. And again, I think it's maybe it's just a more evolved thing in certain ways. Well, there maybe or maybe also Eric. It's that we're our age and we talk to people who are more evolved. I don't know how 22-year-olds talk about music now. Really, I don't
yeah.
want I don't want to claim that the world has improved, but it's possible that my it's that my feed has improved. My social media feed has improved. Like
Yeah, that's funny.
I don't see snarky shit anymore because I don't surround myself with those people. I surround myself with deadheads. They either love things or it's just not for them. You know.
We'll briefly before we wrap this up, we'll briefly just give a plug to the tour coming up. Although the one little
Mm,
trivia thing I wanted to mention too, and this is going to seem like I'm being gossipy, but I'll tell you why I'm actually said it. Is near the end of the article, GQ article, it said that he met his girlfriend on Tinder. I only say that because he mentions Tinder in the song Bobby and the Rat Kings, right?
mm.
It goes from Tinder to Cinder, or she goes from Tinder to Cinder. I just didn't know if that had some reference to how he mentioned her, and that's why. Because people are like, "Oh, that's kind of funny." He mentions Reddit and Tinder in his in an album, or in a song.
Yeah,
So, okay, so boy, talk about. So how old? He's 60, right? So Adam's
yeah.
60 or 61, or he's going to turn 61 this year. He's going to turn 61 in
He's 60.
August.
Yeah,
So I say that, and some of the band members are older. That boy, did they have a tour that he is going to have to rest a lot and make sure he, doesn't sing 1492 every night or Hanging Tree,
it's a
uh,
long tour,
because
but at
it's
the same
yeah,
time, you know what I mean. They've got. I mean, actually, I'm very curious to see sort of the set times if they're going to play. I mean, it's a long tour. Are they going to go 2 hours, more like an hour 45? You know me. If they want to give 15 extra minutes to the Gaslight Anthem, they are welcome to do that. I'll take as much Gaslight Anthem as I can get to. This is one of the few tours where if both bands played like 90 minutes, I would be stoked. The one time I would take less, quote unquote, less Crows. I think the Crows will play a pretty long headlining set, and Gaslight will play something more like what Dashboard played a couple years ago. But because
did you say
I'm excited, I love them both. You know,
did
it's
you
great.
say Gaslight's in your top five bands?
Oh, they're. I mean,
Maybe
second,
number two.
they're
Okay,
of like modern bands. I sort of try to chunk it right because it's like it's hard to compare like anyone to like the Grateful Dead and Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. But it's like
right.
of bands that have really existed and been are sort of like it's my bands. They're number two. It's them. And it's Brian Fallon to Adam Duritz. You know what I mean? Brian Fallon, I think, is a spectacular songwriter.
Okay.
Um, they also have interesting histories too, and I think they have. I would love to hear a dual interview actually with the two of them because I think they have sort of a lot in common in that trajectory and that like
Okay.
it was their second record, but Gaslight had a huge second record, the '59 sound. But they were so crystallized by that record. They played with Springsteen. They sort of hit this certain thing, and then there was a lot of like you couldn't read an interview or a review of a Gaslight Anthem show in 2010 without a reference to they played with Bruce Springsteen. They're from New
Oh,
Jersey,
right.
right? And it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and it was sort of he had this thing of like I love I'm a lot more than a guy who just Bruce happened to like. I mean, not that I don't love Bruce, but like, geez, like, um, I'm a person with like opinions, and I write other things too. And they wrote some records that I think are great that are underrated in part because they're in the way that certain things like it's not August, and it's like it's not the '59 sound. So I think they have actually. I think they've got a lot to talk about, and I would love to hear a dual interview with them about sort of like those feelings of having those big moments early, and then what that looks like, how you sort of process that over time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's
I'm
interesting.
stoked. You'll I think everyone's gonna have maybe not everyone. I don't know, but someone won't like it. But I think you're all gonna have a great time with the Gaslight Anthem. Is my
Okay.
feeling. Um,
But as we get to the tour and we see what songs they play, and if they remember the last couple tours, and we understand it has to do with age and selling out the sheds and everything, they kind of play like 50% greatest hits, and then remember that the Butter Miracle original tour, there wasn't a lot of room for extra songs, right? Because if they
Right,
played,
because you get the whole suite in there,
yeah, and you got
kind
the
of.
whole suite, and then you kind of, what do we? I forget. We did the numbers once. There was like 4 songs that they rotated in and out, or 5, but even some of them were
Yeah,
popular. Like even some of the ones they were rotating in and out was like a Sullivan Street, which is clearly more well known than like
right.
Carriage or
Mrs.
something like that.
Potter's, something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah,
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. So it'll be interesting to because again, he's been saying more in interviews, kind of when he was talking about how he kind of wished that. Yeah, I don't know how to say that. Maybe that people understood what he was trying to do and his genius, which I think I do get it because I think it is his albums are genius. A little bitter about it, but also he wishes more. Like as a side to that, he wishes more people appreciated the deep dives. That's funny. Mrs. Potter still gets people going, but in particular, he said something like he thinks "Good Night L.A.," which is funny. He doesn't play that live, but that
Yeah.
should get a huge reaction. The other one he mentioned recently, like he thinks or he wishes that when he get because he's so proud of Palisades Park that when he starts singing that, he thinks the fans should go nuts because it's a great song, even though it wasn't a huge hit. And that's what people do at the Bruce song shows. So it's interesting because I know they're trying to sell tickets, and some people just want to hear the same songs all the time, and then
Mhm.
other people like us just are
And by
loving that.
nature,
So
yeah, and also by nature though, with these sheds, right? Like you are selling to casual fans by
yep,
if you look at the percentage of like what they could sell if you were, because they've done theater tours, you know what I mean? So
yep,
clearly there's a sort of a more, call it hardcore, it's fair, but like a little more dedicated fan base. That's probably in a town. It's probably, call it 4 or 5,000 people. The group that would fill the theater.
yes,
But then you go from 5,000 to 13. Some of these sheds with the lawns, right? They can see 20,000 people.
you're exactly right.
That's kind of your gap between like the dedicated fans and the people who are like, oh, Counting Crows are coming to town. Maybe I'll go check that out. I'll go hang out on the lawn and listen to them.
You're exactly
And
right.
I think part of it is like, I don't know, like they've made the choice to play those types of shows. I don't know the financials and what that looks like and whatnot, but like,
Yep.
yeah, maybe they've kind of felt like, yeah, we want to do these bigger shows, but yeah, we also recognize that means we're going to have to play Mr. Jones, or we think we should play Mr. Jones. I don't know
Yeah. Yep.
I would love to ask them actually about that. I would love to talk to them about their evolved feelings about that song at this point, given that they play it every night now and didn't first. Just that it's a change, right? They did not play that song every night for 20 something years, right? They were studious about. They would play it, but it was not every. It was, you were not guaranteed to hear Mr. Jones.
Yep.
And if you go back, basically since COVID, you're guaranteed to hear Mr. Jones. You show up, you're hearing Mr. Jones,
Yeah. On
and that's a
Omaha,
change.
and yep.
That's a
There's a
change, and
couple.
I would be curious just to hear what the feeling change was about that. It doesn't even have to be. I think, also sometimes I think fans get very like the cynical thing of like, well, they're doing it for the casuals. I don't know. Maybe they just felt like, I think Adam said when they came back from COVID that he was just sort of like so happy that people showed up that he was like, I don't want to disappoint people. He had that kind of energy to it
Well,
too.
there
Maybe
also
that's part
could
of.
be, and then you could also argue that if he wants to, let's say the suite, if he wants to expose the suite to the most people, you lure them in with the
Right,
greatest hits, and
right.
then you say, "Hey,
Have
this
you
is the
play a
new
shed,
suite," and then
right?
a certain percentage of the shed, and it's percentage of a higher base number, goes out and buys the suite because they like it, even though they originally went for Omaha.
Yeah.
So that could be the case too. So yeah, it's interesting, and it'd be interesting if Adam would ever want to again do what are those shows that you said you went to that had like the 3 back to back and they didn't play any of the same
Oh,
songs?
at the Wellmont Theater when they
Yeah,
opened, they opened the Wellmont Theater with 3 shows in a row where they didn't
would
repeat
they
a song.
ever do that again? I would be on a plane in a second. So, yeah, so 43 stops in the US with Cast
Yes.
of Anthem, 26, and then they only take a 1 month break after that. I can't even imagine. And then they're going to do 26 stops in Europe. So that it is a busy year. So, for Crows,
We're gonna have a lot of shows to listen to and break down.
so
Um,
please go watch them. I'll be there, and Chris will be there at a couple of them. We'll be back with all of the other news as well. I'll also do
yeah.
a shout out to
And a
Emmy.
special interview coming up, just
Yes,
FYI.
we have more interviews. We have some good ideas for shows. If you have ideas
Hmm.
for us for a show or other tips or anything, Sullivan Street PC at protonmail.com. Street spell out PC for podcast. And we'd love to hear from you. And a shout out to Emmy, who I was able to talk to a little bit before the Kobe Brown show in LA. We had to talk, and he said some nice things about the podcast, and it was really good just to. Yeah, I think that was only the second time, and I actually got to talk to him for a little bit. The first time I met him, I talked to him for like 5 seconds as I was stumbling drunk. So, so anyway, thanks for listening to our first hot take episode on Sullivan Street, and we'll be back later this year with all sorts of updates from what's going to be a busy year with Counting Crows. Thank you, Chris, for joining. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.